part 6 of the Bible Mandela Effects. If you're unfamiliar with Mandela Effects, I recommend that you watch parts 1 through 5 to get an idea of what we're talking about in this video series. Basically, Mandela Effects are false memories that a large group of people have. And the question is, where did those memories come from? Either a large group of people remember things falsely and they find out later that what they remember was incorrect, or that they remembered things correctly and that things have changed. And that's what we're talking about with Bible Mandela Effects. People have memorized the Bible, memorized Bible verses, and then when they look back at them now, in present day, it's not what they remembered, not what they memorized. So let's begin with, for today, we'll look at Matthew 2, verse 17. This one is very easy, very straightforward one to get across. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. Jeremiah is a book of the Bible. Jeremiah the prophet was one of the major prophets. But look at the King James Version now. Then what was fulfilled? That which was spoken by Jeremy the prophet. And that's the question. Jeremy, no other translation says Jeremiah. And the question is, with Bible Mandela Effects, is the Bible supernaturally being changed? Is it a demonic thing, a demonic activity of the changing of the Bible? And are these demons making fun of the Bible, changing the name Jeremiah to Jeremy, a first name basis with the prophet? So it's just strange. But as you look through all the other translations, it says Jeremiah. All of them say Jeremiah. And out of the blue, now the King James Version says Jeremy the prophet. Most people see that, and that just really blows their mind. When you look at the original Greek, it's obvious Jeremiah. Nowhere in any way should it say Jeremy. So that one is an easy one to catch. Next, let's look at Genesis 18:12. Now this is very interesting. Abraham and Sarah, let's back up 2 verses. Abraham and Sarah are being confronted by the Lord, and the Lord tells Abraham and Sarah, let's back up to verse 10. This person, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, which was behind him. Next verse. So notice what this person is saying. The Lord is visiting, and he says Sarah will have a son. Verse 11. Now, Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. Now look at verse 12. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I'm worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? So when I saw the word pleasure, and in all the translations, I thought, okay, is she talking about pleasure in having a child? But as you read through all the translations, look at what the focus is on. So she laughed silently to herself and said, how could a worn-out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is very old, is also so old? So the focus is on the pleasure aspect with her old husband. And as you continue to scroll down, look at the focus of what it's about. It isn't about the aspect of having a child, but the pleasure. After I'm worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? Okay, and look at this. Even in the King James Bible, after I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure? Okay. After I've grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also. As you continue to scroll down, the focus is on pleasure, but especially scroll on down to, notice Contemporary English Version, will I really know such happiness? Look at the Good News Translation, though. Now that I am old and worn out, can I still enjoy sex? And besides, my husband is old too. So the Good News Translation is getting more specific. She's not talking about enjoying having a child. She's talking about just the sex act. Enjoy it being old. The International Standard Version. After I'm so old, my husband is old too. Am I going to have sex? The focus in all of these translations is clearly the aspect of having sex. It's a twisted version of what is originally meant with what the Lord said. Now, there's residual evidence in the very next verse because the Lord restates what she was thinking. The Lord knows what she's thinking. She said this to herself. And look what the Lord says. Why did Sarah laugh and say, well, I really have a child now that I am old? Verse 12 said nothing about a child in any of the translations. She was talking about enjoying having sex. So it's a totally different aspect of, in verse 13, what the Lord restates that she said in her mind. Okay? So it's really wild when you compare the two. So let's go back and look at verse 12 in the original Greek. And this is how it flows in the original Greek. Laughed and Sarah in herself, saying, for not yet has it happened to me until now. Okay? So the whole idea of having a child, back in verse 10, remember verse 10, the Lord told her she was going to have a child. For not yet has it happened to me until now. The idea of having a child. So even in the original Greek, it's referring back to the idea of having a child. Notice there's nothing about sex and pleasure in the original Greek. Yet, in the King James Bible and all of the translations, the focus is on pleasure in having sex. So to me, that was fascinating to see. Next, I wanted to go to, let me scroll down to Luke 17:34. I'll go ahead and put it in manually. In Luke 17:34, very popular verse. I tell you, on that night, 2 people will be in one bed, one will be taken, the other left. Now remember, a man and a woman will be in bed together. Notice, that night, New Living Translation, 2 people will be asleep in one bed, one will be taken, the other left. Jesus is talking basically about the rapture occurring. Look at the King James Bible. I tell you, in that night there shall be 2 men in one bed, one shall be taken, the other left. And especially in modern day, with the homosexual agenda that we've seen so much in society, the idea of 2 men in one bed didn't sound consistent to me with what I had read in the Bible. So I looked up that verse in the King James and in the original Greek, and it says, I say to you, in this night there will be 2 upon bed one bed. The one will be taken and the other will be left. It's vague. It just says 2 upon one bed. So it's vague as far as man, woman, just says 2 people. So when you look at the original Greek, at the original versions, it's more consistent when it says 2 people will be in one bed. But notice nowhere does it specifically say 2 men in one bed. The New King James, 2 men will be in one bed. So it's just inconsistent. The New American Standard is closer when it says 2 in one bed. Okay, so that was unusual to me. But I could see how the spirit of the age could use the King James Bible to say, see, the Bible talks about homosexuality, 2 men in one bed. And then the very next verse, if you go to the very next verse, if you're talking about that as your focus in verse 34, then the next verse, 2 women will be grinding grain together in the New International Version. It's consistent, grinding grain together. But look at the King James Version. 2 women shall be grinding together. The concept of grain left out. When you put that with verse 34, talking about men and the homosexual idea of it, then you get this twisted version of what the Bible is talking about and how that could be taken out of context to support the homosexual agenda. So, just wanted to show these verses together. Again, Mandela Effects, the idea of the Bible changing, and also the Bible changing to reflect times. How Satan can be twisting even the very name of the prophet Jeremiah to Jeremy. It's sort of a mockery of the Bible. Just wanted to show those together.